On the surface, the US economy looks pretty solid, right? The stock market's hitting all-time highs. We keep hearing that inflation is cooling down. But if you peel back just one layer, there's a completely different story unfolding. A quiet credit crisis is brewing that, honestly, not enough people are talking about. So today, we're going to dive into the numbers behind America's debt.
So, how do we make sense of this? On one hand, the headlines are screaming booming economy. But on the other hand, what's actually happening on the ground for everyday Americans? Well, the numbers tell a very, very different story. And this is the huge disconnect, right? The headlines paint this really sunny picture, but for millions of people, the reality is a massive storm cloud of record-breaking personal debt. It really makes you wonder, is the growth we're all celebrating just being fueled by a debt crisis that's building right under our noses?
To really get a handle on what's going on, you have to see this as two separate but related problems happening at the exact same time. It's not just about the government spending money it doesn't have. There's a parallel crisis unfolding at the household level, and it's affecting pretty much everyone.
Okay, first, let's just look at the national level. The U.S. national debt has now officially blown past $38 trillion. I mean, just to put that in perspective, that is more debt than any nation has held in all of human history. It's an absolutely staggering figure.
And of course, borrowing all that money isn't free. The United States now spends $1 trillion a year just on the interest payments for that debt. Think about that. The U.S. is now spending more on interest than it does on its entire national defense budget. That interest payment is now the single fastest growing expense for the federal government. And this is where it really hits home. It seems like a lot of Americans are following the government's playbook. Total household debt has just exploded by 60% over the last decade. It's now at $18.6 trillion, the highest level ever recorded. So while the government is piling up debt on a national scale, the rest of the country is quietly drowning at home. This quote just perfectly captures how fragile the whole situation is. It's like our entire economic structure is being held together by something that was never, ever meant to be a permanent fix. So how in the world do we make sense of that huge $18.6 trillion household number? Well, we have to break it down. Because you see, not all debt is created equal. And a really great way to think about it is through this classic movie framework. There's good debt, there's bad debt, and then there's some truly ugly debt. Let's start with the good debt. This is also the biggest category by far, housing debt. This is what most of us think of when we imagine taking on a big, but usually productive loan. Yeah, so mortgage balances make up the huge majority of this, hitting a record $13 trillion. And you can see that home equity lines of credit, or HELOCs, they've jumped a bit lately, but the total is still pretty modest in comparison. Now, why is this considered good debt? Well, because in theory, it's tied to a valuable asset that hopefully appreciates over time, your home. Okay, next up, we're moving into the bad territory. And we're starting with what's become a rite of passage for millions of Americans, student loans. Right now, there is $1.7 trillion in student loan debt out there, and it's weighing on about 44 million people. And a huge reason we're in this mess is that since 1983, college tuition has just skyrocketed by more than 700%. I mean, that's way faster than inflation, housing costs, you name it. And here is the immediate, painful result. Just 1 year ago, less than 1% of borrowers were seriously delinquent. We're talking 90 or more days late on their payments. What about today? That number has shot past 9%. That's not a gradual increase, that's an alarming spike. This quote, okay, it's a little blunt, I'll admit, but it makes a really crucial point. Unlike a mortgage or a car loan, you can't just sell your college degree if you get into financial trouble. Student loans are one of the very few types of debt that, in most cases, you cannot get rid of even if you declare bankruptcy. They just stick with you. And now we get to the ugly. And to be perfectly honest, calling this stuff ugly might be the understatement of the year. This is probably the most dangerous kind of debt for the average person. We're talking about credit cards. For the first time ever, U.S. credit card debt has officially crossed the $1 trillion mark. And to give you some context on how fast this is growing, Americans have piled on more credit card debt in just the last 4 years than they did in the entire decade after the 2008 financial crisis. And just like we saw with student loans, delinquencies are rising fast. The percentage of accounts that are seriously behind on payments has now climbed above 12%.
Let's be really clear here. That is the highest level we have seen since the 2008 financial crisis. That should be a giant flashing red light for everybody.
But wait, there's more. Here's the real kicker. The average interest rate on a credit card is now over 21%. That's hovering around an all-time high. So that 12% of people who are already behind, they're not just late, they're getting crushed by compounding interest, which makes it almost impossible to ever catch up. So you'd think with all that going on, things couldn't get any more chaotic, right? Well, wrong. A new force has entered the arena, and it's making it easier than ever to fall into this trap. I'm talking about the normalization of debt for even the smallest everyday purchases. You have seen these buttons everywhere. Buy now, pay later. But let's be real, this isn't some new financial innovation. It's a marketing makeover. It's just old-fashioned credit disguised as modern convenience, and it's training an entire generation to see debt as a normal part of daily life.
And the data already shows this convenience is causing real problems. Nearly a quarter of people who use these services have already missed a payment. And a full 40% say they flat out regret using it once they realize the true cost. It's the same old credit trap, just with a slick new user interface.
So this completely reframes the whole story. The next time you hear a report that consumer spending remains strong, you have to remember what's really going on. For so many people, this isn't about buying luxuries. People are financing their day-to-day survival, one installment plan at a time.
And this quote just sums it all up, doesn't it? When you look at the economy from this debt-first perspective, it doesn't look like a boom at all. It looks fragile. It looks like a giant game of hot potato, where every record-high stock price and every flashy spending report is built on borrowed money.
The tough truth is, America isn't really saving for the future right now. It's financing the present, and that's what makes this whole quiet crisis so dangerous. It isn't loud or sudden, it's just happening gradually, right out in the open, and it leaves us with one critical, unavoidable question.